We are live.
Well, here we are. It's another time for Come Together. I'm your host, Brooke Halpin, and with me today, of course, is my co-host, Mr. Tom Gauka, and we have a lovely guest who knows a lot about the Beatles, and he's written two books about the Beatles. And we're going to talk with David Schwensen today about probably the most momentous event that occurred for the Beatles in terms of their live performance, and that's the Beatles at Shea, August 15th, 1965. David, welcome to the show.
Brooke, thank you very much. It's fun to be here. And Tom, thank you also.
Thank you.
It's good to be here with both you guys to talk about the Beatles.
Oh my God, yeah. So in 1965, you saw the Beatles at their Cleveland performance. Is that right?
Well, it was 1966. Now, see, the
Oh, you
Beatles
saw, okay.
they were banned. They were banned. They were not allowed in Cleveland in 1965.
They were banned.
They were banned, yes. So
why were they banned?
Because of what happened at their concert on September 15th, 1964 in Cleveland. The police considered the fans had gotten out of control. They rushed to the stage. The police ran up on the stage. They pushed John and George off their microphone.
Oh my God.
And they ran up and they stopped the show, pulled the Beatles off stage. And
Wow.
it was pretty chaotic. The fans were really upset. They delayed the show for a while, but they let the Beatles come back out. There's a fun story, too, about how they let the Beatles come back out to finish that show. But because of that, the Beatles were banned from coming back to Cleveland. And the mayor of Cleveland at that time, Mayor Ralph Locher, the reason he gave for banning not only the Beatles, but all rock and roll shows from Cleveland, he said, that's not the way little girls should behave in public.
Well. How
Yeah.
things have changed.
And now it's the home of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Go figure.
Yeah, that's really funny. Yeah, of course. So you is this what you just told me and all this? Is it written in your book about the Beatles at Cleveland?
Yeah, that's a story about the Beatles in Cleveland. And
Yeah.
I got to see them in 1966. And honestly, I mean, 50 some years later, I never thought I'd write a book about that experience I had, but
Oh,
it's something I've always talked about. And you guys probably know. I mean, I'm a comedy coach. Actually, my day job is I work with stand-up comedians. So I've written a couple other books,
yeah.
and
Yeah.
I'm the author of the book called "How to Be a Working Comic," a business book for comedians, and comedy FAQs and answers. And the thing is, once I had those publishing deals and everything, I was like, well, I really enjoy talking about the Beatles, and I kind of wrote a book. Really, it was for myself, the Beatles in Cleveland, my memories.
Hmm.
But then again, it's something I talked about all the time with the comedians. I'm a name dropper. I mean, I will tell you, I remember standing at the New York City Improv Club on West 44th Street in Hell's Kitchen. I think it was during the Rolling Stones 1989 tour. We're talking, what's the best band you've ever seen? What were the best bands? And everybody's saying the Doors and Jimi Hendrix. And I would always say, I saw the Beatles. They're like, what? What was that like?
Yeah, it
And
was
I
a big
tell them,
deal. Yeah.
yeah, because that one was a riot also. The kids rushed the stage. They had to pull the Beatles off the stage for their safety and the whole
That's
bit.
nuts. That's
Yeah, it
nuts.
was. It was Beatlemania. It was a hard day's night in person.
Wow, that's incredible. So, what is the all right? So, you wrote books about you've written books about comedy.
Yes.
Do you also consider yourself to be a comic, like a stand-up comic as well?
I don't consider myself that. That's too much pressure on me because I coach comedians, but I am a presenter. I do programs. Matter of fact, I do about 40 live shows a year myself. Half of them will be about the Beatles.
Oh,
I have three different live programs I do about the Beatles that are kind of lectures, and I show rare films, share a lot of stories. And the other half I do, 20, 30 shows. I do comedy workshops actually.
comedy
So I'm
workshop. Okay.
Yeah, I'm doing one tomorrow. I'm doing it for a senior center tomorrow. And what it is an hour program where I talk about the history of stand-up comedy, my experiences working with very famous people, and then I bring them up to do stand-up comedy. And I'm the host of the Tonight Show. I'm Johnny Carson, not the new
I
kids,
see.
not Jay
Right,
Leno, but
Uh,
yeah.
right. You're Johnny
So
Carson, okay, not Jay.
yeah. So
Uh,
we have fun. We have fun. They do it. They tell jokes.
so, is there any connection between you being involved in the comedy world and the Beatles? Is there any connection at all, or is the connection
No,
simply that you wrote a book about comedy, and then you considered, well, if I could write books, then I could also write a book about my experience with the Beatles in Cleveland?
yeah, it's such a long story. I mean, I am probably mainly known as a behind the scenes guy in comedy. I worked in television, New York and Los Angeles, behind the scenes. I was on stage a little bit. Um, so when I wrote The Beatles in Cleveland, which was my third book, and it came out, and it was so funny because I would get emails from comedians like, "What the heck are you doing? Who is this?" At one time, there was this very famous, well-known poker game in New York City between all the comics on a Monday night at a well-known comics, and they would all be over there. And one of the comics got out of the poker game, ran out of money, so he sat down on the couch. He's looking around. He picked up a book from the coffee table. It was The Beatles at Shea Stadium by Dave Schwensen. He emailed me. He said, "Is this you? What are you doing?" I said, "Yeah, it's kind of like my other persona. I'm a
Uh-huh.
Gemini. I'm a Gemini, so I'm allowed to have two."
Oh, okay. So there's two of you. I got you.
Yes, yes,
Yeah, very
yeah.
good.
I mean, I do have to tell people I have two different Facebook pages, two different Instagrams, two different. Everything is two different because one is Beatles, one is comedy.
Well, you are a true Gemini, absolutely.
Yes, thank you.
Yes. Yeah, no doubt about that. You and Paul McCartney. Yeah.
The day after Paul McCartney, and the day before what was Brian Wilson's birthday.
Oh, really?
Same birthday as Ann Wilson and Mo Howard from the Three Stooges. So there you go.
Oh, there's the comedy right there. Yeah. So
Yeah, that's it.
You're June 19th then.
Yes, I am.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, now that we've established that, we can probably
Yes.
talk about the Beatles now. And
Yeah.
all right. So, it's really fascinating. I heard the concert being played. We're talking about Shea now. Shea
Yes.
65. I was up in Connecticut. I was living in Connecticut at the time. And the two big radio stations, WDRC, WPOP. And I had a band at the time, and we always got together, even when we weren't playing, because we were chums. We'd hang out all the time, and we knew that the Beatles were playing Shea that night. So we turned on the local radio station, and we were getting some of the performance at Shea, over the radio, and it was overwhelming, I guess you could say. It was hysterical. It was nothing like I or anyone else had ever heard before. And I have a recording. I have the recording of the concert from Shea,
Hmm.
and I listened to it before we got together today.
Yeah.
And it's just overwhelming is the word that just keeps coming to mind because the amount of energy that is being thrust at the Beatles is unparalleled. You can hear it. I mean, you can hear the screaming. Yes, I know they screamed at the Hollywood Bowl and they screamed, in Cleveland, they screamed wherever they played. But to me, this was, as John Lennon said, the top of the mountain. And I really do believe it was the top of the mountain for the Beatles. Because once they did that and they experienced that, that's it. You can't go any higher, really. I don't think. And I
I
think that
agree.
I think
I
they knew
agree. Yeah, and I think it's funny. It's in my book because one of the people I interviewed for the Shea Stadium concert was Cousin Brucey, right? The
that. Of
very
course.
famous DJ. He's still on the
Yeah, of
air,
course. Of
and
course.
he told me the energy was so. And he was on stage. He introduced Sid Bernstein, who introduced Ed
Yes.
Sullivan, who introduced the
Yeah.
Beatles. He
Right.
said the energy from that crowd he thought was enough electricity to light up all of Manhattan for
Yeah.
like hours.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's the energy he felt.
Yeah. Yeah. The energy. And so there's John, right? And he went crazy. And Ringo actually says this, and you probably know this. Ringo said that John went crazy at Shea, that he
Hmm.
lost his mind. And there's on the recordings that I have of Shea, John at one point, and I have a video of this too. He throws his arms up in the air and he's going, he's
Hmm.
just this foreign tongue, like nobody knows what the hell he's saying or what the hell he's doing, probably including him, probably. And that's where maybe it was because, again, the overwhelming energy being thrust at him. It's That's my only explanation. And
Yeah.
I don't know if, other than Ringo saying that, I don't think Paul ever talked about what John happened with John, but something definitely happened with John at Shea. And so,
Well,
go ahead.
yeah, you got, the excitement of it. You got to go back to the times, the era. And think about this also. These were college age kids. These were not like old, like Frank Sinatra, these, professionals been dealing with. They were college age kids. They were standing in front of an audience. They had never had an audience that big before. Brian
Right.
was not going to allow them to do anything like that. Brian wouldn't allow them to do Madison Square Garden in 1964 because he said they couldn't afford to have any empty
Well,
seats. It would look bad for the boys.
he was afraid. Brian was afraid that they wouldn't be able to fill the seats when he met with
Right.
Sid. Yeah.
Right. The same fear was there for Shea Stadium, 55,600 seats. Sid Bernstein, he's a wheeler dealer, he's a schmoozer. That's what you call in show business.
I know
And
Sid. I know
yeah.
Sid.
All right. He told Brian for every unsold seat, he would give him $10.
Hmm.
And Brian and the Beatles, money talks. Okay. So
Yeah.
anyway, they're out in front of this big crowd. It was a complete sellout. And yeah, these kids, these four kids come walking out of that, and they were scared to death too. I mean, they were back there. Paul was thrown up, and they were all nervous. They had two separate rooms. You've seen the Shea Stadium TV special. They have the 16 millimeter cameras on them in their dressing room, holding up the presents they got from the fans and tuning their guitars and all that stuff. There was a separate room where everybody was in. I mean, Mick Jagger, Keith Richards was in
Keith
there.
Richards. Yeah. Yeah.
Alan Klein was in there. Dig
Yes.
that.
Yeah.
Okay, the Ronettes, just different people. Cousin Brucey, they were all in there, and they were shaking. They were scared. They were chain smoking, and it was just like whatever. And even before they went out on the field, John Lennon standing just. I mean, the fans couldn't see him yet. He was by the visitors' dugout. They had the guitars on, ready to run out in the field. Sid Bernstein, Cousin Brucey, Ed Sullivan standing there, ready to go on. And John Lennon asked Cousin Brucey. He said, "Is this anything to be scared of?" Because they didn't know what was going to happen. The stand, if you've ever been to Shea Stadium during a concert, I used to see the Rolling Stones there and all these things. It shakes like a diving board. I mean, Shea's not there anymore, but those upper decks, I
Right.
mean, you
Yeah.
could find I had a buddy hanging on to me during the Stones concert because he thought I was going to fly out. And Cousin Brucey said, "No, you don't have anything to be afraid of. Fans love you and all this." And then they ran out, and you could tell. I think, in the beginning of the show, they're still nervous. They were going through those songs pretty fast and
Yeah.
just getting
Yeah.
through
Oh,
the
yeah, for
motion.
sure. Yeah.
But
Very quickly.
as they got more comfortable and more eased at the end, that's where you see John messing around with the crowd, and he plays that keyboard at the end. He said he was doing his Jerry Lee Lewis bit. He's playing with his elbows and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
by that
Yeah.
time, yeah, they were completely out of their minds. I mean, how ridiculous was this? And like you
Yeah.
said, they couldn't match that afterwards. I think for the Beatles
No.
touring,
No.
it was all downhill after that.
I agree. Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, the I'm down piece, which I have. I don't know how I get this stuff, David. People send me stuff, but I have the video, of
Hmm.
John playing
Sure.
I'm down with the organ with his elbow, and George is just, he couldn't. He's just cracking up left and right,
Yeah.
seeing and all this while looking over, and there's John doing this. So
Yeah.
it's just incredible. And so let's talk a little bit about the opening acts, which I think is really quite interesting. When you look at the opening acts, now bear in mind, we know that Cousin Brucey came out, he introduced Sid Bernstein, Sid Caesar, that's a
Mhm.
whole other story.
Yeah, it's a whole no. That's the comedy. Go back to the comedy
Yeah,
books for
well,
that one.
I worked with
Way
Sid.
back.
I worked with Sid for a while. But anyhow, okay, so Sid Bernstein, who was a friend of mine, um, and and then of course Ed comes out. Now the audience had been listening to, sitting there waiting, right, for the main act. They heard Brenda Holloway, King Curtis backing up Cannibal and the Headhunters, Sound Incorporated, the Young Rascals, Killer
No,
Joe.
time out. That's a mistake.
The Rascals were not there in
The
'65.
Rascals, no, they were not there. That's a very common mistake. I see that around, but no, they did not perform
Was
in
that '66? Was
1965.
that '66?
No, they never opened for the Beatles. Sid Bernstein was the manager of the Rascals,
And he
and he
put up
put they
the
put a big
Rascals
thing
were
on the
coming.
back says the
Yeah,
Rascals are coming, just like the Capitol Records did for the Beatles before the
Beatles are
Ed Sullivan
coming.
Show.
Right. Yeah,
He
yeah.
copied that. The Rascals are coming.
Right.
No, if the Rascals were at Shea Stadium, they were sitting in the stands watching the show on paid tickets. So we have to make that clear because I hear that all the time. Oh,
That's
the
all.
Rascals were there. They
That's a
opened
mis
for the Beatles.
that's
Nope.
misinformation all over the damn place. You know, it
Yeah.
really is.
No.
So,
I'll tell you. I'll
okay,
tell you something. Okay. I'll tell you something else later too that people are mistaken about. But go ahead. But the Rascals were not there.
okay.
They didn't open.
Killer Joe and the Discotheque Dancers, right?
Yeah. How about
Oh,
that?
how about that? Okay. Now, when you look at all this, this is like, maybe 5 minutes of this and 5 minutes of that. Meanwhile, the crowd is just they don't want to hear this stuff. They don't want to see, they don't want to, no offense to Killer Joe, but it's kind of like a variety Ed Sullivan show
Exactly. That's what it was.
because it was Ed
Exactly.
Sullivan show basically.
It was a
And so
variety show.
it was a variety show. So that's why
Hmm.
they had all these opening acts. And I
Yes.
do know that Sound Incorporated was managed by Brian Epstein
Right.
because the
Yes.
Beatles met them in Hamburg, like back in
Hmm.
'63 or something.
Yeah.
And I remember seeing a video of this. And one of the main guys in Sound Incorporated, he was a dancer. And he was doing like
Yeah.
splits. He was jumping up and down on the stage
Well,
because they were an instrumental band.
right. They
Yeah,
were like the Beatles in Hamburg, mock show, mock
yeah,
show. So
yeah,
that's where
yeah,
they got that
exactly.
stuff from.
Yeah,
Yeah, I've seen that.
exactly,
Yes.
exactly. And of
But
course, then what happened was because of the relationship with them touring with the Beatles and Brian, of course, yeah, three of the members from Sound Incorporated, they play saxophones on Good Morning on Pepper,
yes.
which is a very interesting, link to see how, something happens in '65 and it manifests 2 years later on a recording of Pepper. I think it pretty fascinating. And there's also an interesting connection is that Sounds Incorporated used a weird instrument called the cavaline. Cavaline. And it's a very unusual instrument. And if you listen to Good Morning, I'm sorry, Maybe You're a Rich Man, you listen to that song, and it's like John's playing the cavaline. So
Mm.
again, the influences that come along the line, which manifest later, to me is quite fascinating. Tom, I'm sorry, please join us, please chime
Oh, I'm
in.
in. I'm in. Hey,
Hey,
Dave.
I just want to interrupt. You talk about things that come back. Of course, that's how Billy Preston got to be one of the Beatles. They met him in Hamburg playing for Little
Of
Richard.
course,
Right.
Then
yeah, yeah,
George brought him in 1969 or whatever to cool
of course,
everybody's jets, and
yeah,
he got his
that's
he
right.
got his name on Get Back, the Beatles with Billy Preston.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
Yeah,
I got
Tom, I
some
didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
That's okay. I got some random questions. One, you look disgustingly young, so I'm kind of curious. How young were you when you
When
were at these shows? Were you like a fetus that they just threw in there, or because you look very young?
I appreciate that, and I always tell people, I got good genes, not the ones I'm wearing, but my mom and dad also look very young. Yes, I'm an OG. I'm an original fan. February 9th, 1964, the Ed Sullivan Show. I never give out my age. I let people guess. But if they read the book, The Beatles in Cleveland, they'll know how old I am because I talked about I was 13 years old when I saw the Beatles. So I'll put it that way.
Okay,
Both of these
well,
Hmm.
books are out there. I just checked. You can go on Amazon and get a Kindle version of it, or you can
Hmm.
get a used copy. But right now you're at your 60th anniversary for Shea.
Yeah,
So
yeah, coming up next month.
yeah, so we're at a point where it's great that you're out here kind of talking about it. Is there any kind of updates that you're going to do on either of the books?
Honestly, yes, the Beatles in Cleveland update is the author's edit is about to get ready. I don't know what the page number is. The Beatles in Cleveland out here with me. I think it's about 179 pages. The new version right now stands at 401
oh,
pages.
wow. Whoa,
The thing is, when that book came out in 2007, actually, And again, I mentioned I do a lot of live programs. I go out and I do three separate Beatles programs live with, and so I've always gotten fans have come up to me and they give me more information. Oh, I was there. This is what I remember, or this and that. And really, I've kind of kept track of all this. Or they'll send me, Brooke, you said the same thing. Like, where do you get some of these things? People send it to you. People sent me, videos of the Cleveland concert. I didn't know they existed. Different, soundtracks, different and pictures and all this. So I've collected all this stuff for all these years. I thought, well, let's just go with this and just do an update. So yeah, I'm kind of on the final run through on that one,
Yeah, it's
getting
good.
the
I mean,
photos and everything together.
the Shea keeps evolving. It's still like, very like one of the highlights of the Beatle, experience. And
Yeah.
you're wondering what are they doing? What are they doing to that music now? Because you have the anthology coming out soon, and with the new technology that they have, that the music is
Right.
going to be somehow modified to our, our pleasure.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see if they can do anything to improve that. What is cool about that Beatles at Shea Stadium television special? Now, originally that was going to be called The Beatles in New York. They started filming them as soon as they got off the plane on Friday, and they were going to film them until they left on Monday was a rain date, so they leave on Tuesday. But they edited all this stuff. They destroyed all this film. All you have left is what's that TV special. But
Hmm.
the cool thing about it is that it was filmed in 35 millimeter. All
Mhm.
right. Now you look at back at Woodstock, the movie, Monterey, the movie, those were all done at 16 millimeter.
16. Yeah.
Yeah, the Beatles at Shea Stadium. That's like Ben-Hur with Charlton Heston. It's like, Cleopatra with Elizabeth Taylor. They had 13 35 millimeter cameras around Shea Stadium. So that footage,
Hmm.
I mean, you saw that in the Beatles anthology when it came out in 95. I mean, it was like, whoa, you know. Yeah. So, what's in store for the coming up now, but next, I have no idea, but it is amazing. And maybe, we have the original audio recording of that now too. They didn't have that for the Beatles at Shea Stadium TV special. That was overdubbed. And the same thing with that was used in that Ron Howard movie, by the way, too. The
Yeah.
overdubs.
8 days a
They
week.
didn't
Yeah.
use they didn't use the original audio. So
Right. Right.
I have that, and I used that when I was writing the book also.
So, getting back to this instrument that John used, I'm sorry, it's called the clav violin. It's like a violin kind of thing. Just wanted to correct myself on that. But, listening to the Beatles at Shea recording that I have, it's amazing that, and I don't know what version I have, David, to be completely honest with you, but I
Hmm.
do know that it's amazing to me that you could actually, the vocals are up front. You could hear all the guitars. The drums, not so much. Of course, Ringo's up on cloud nine on the platform. But I'm thinking to myself, given the amount of screaming that's going on, it's a pretty great technical accomplishment that they were able to, at least from what I'm hearing, and also, as you probably know, and this will clarify what version I have, there's these overdubs at the end of Babies in Black. I'm sorry, After a Hard Day's Night, George is talking, John is talking, Brian Epstein is talking, and Paul is talking. They're talking about sort of like afterward the experience. So
Right.
that's the version that I have. And of course, we know the whole mystery, about she's a woman and everybody's trying to be my baby. That for whatever reason was not on the original. And I guess because they were changing cameras, they ran out of stock footage or something like that.
Yeah, she's a woman. They ran out of those were big 35 millimeter cameras. They had to be changed. They had those big film canisters at that time. They all had to be changed at the same time. So if you
At the
look
same time.
closely at some of these pictures, you'll see alarm clocks around the stage, different places. The camera people or wherever they're watching these alarm clocks. So they'd spent, this is what kills me too. They filmed the opening acts, all right? Okay, we just said it's a variety show. Who was really interested in that? So by the
Yeah.
time the Beatles came out, they got the first song, and then they ran out of film. So She's a Woman was never filmed. They were changing the canisters then, and Everybody's Trying to Be My Baby was cut out for commercial time. It was I have now in my book, The Shea Stadium. I have the original notes for putting together that TV show. I mean, I couldn't believe I got a hold of this stuff. I'll tell you the truth. I had an envelope shipped to me from Apple in
Hmm.
London with the
Yeah.
original. I mean, I've got a telegram in there originally that was sent by Brian Epstein. I've got the original notes for putting this stuff all together, the TV
Wow.
show, the different edits, everything. I mean, it was like I called him up. I said, "This is like having the Magna Carta sitting on my office floor right now." So I made copies of everything. I have a lot of copies of these things in the book, and then I FedExed them back. I
Yeah.
don't even know how many people knew I had those. When they came out, they were in the vault since the 1960s, and the guy I knew. All right,
Wow.
yeah,
Wow.
but you can tell what version you have by listening to Ringo's Act Naturally, because
Yeah.
they never they use the studio version of that. So if it's the same as the studio version, then you got the overdub one. But in the original one, Ringo's really playing. You can hear the original song.
I'll have to listen to it again. But you said that
Yeah.
there was some kind of misinformation with the opening acts other than the Young Rascals. What was the other misinformation
Oh
about
no,
them?
that's all I have. Just the Young Rascals did not open the show, but
Oh,
everyone else came out. It was a variety show.
yeah.
Even like the disco dancers, they were demonstrating. The Twatusi, the monkey, the swim,
Yeah,
and all that
right,
stuff.
right, right. Yeah.
And and
Yeah.
and, and I talked to a
I
lot
thought
of
there
the
was
fans
something
who were
else.
there. They're like, "Come on, they had to
Yeah,
sit
yeah.
through that."
Yeah. So then when they finally came on stage, of course, they went nuts. They were waiting
Yes.
all
Oh,
the
the
time.
excitement, the adrenaline was building up, and they knew what was coming next. And those
Yeah.
stands were shaking,
Yeah.
and it was just wow. And they even said if they just brought the Beatles out and had them stand in the middle of the field, that would have been enough. The fact that they played on top of this, but
Yeah.
you do listen to the technology from Shea Stadium too, because that was really I consider most of us I think consider that to be the very beginning of stadium rock. And I always
Sure.
point out that Elvis, before he went in the army, Elvis did about 5 or 6 stadium concerts, and the largest one he did was at the Dallas at the Cotton Bowl in Dallas. He had 26,000 fans there. The
Yeah.
Beatles had to more than double that, and they did. 55,600, but they didn't have the technology. The stage at Shea Stadium that wouldn't even hold Keith Richards amplifiers anymore.
Yeah.
Okay, I mean it was
Yeah.
very nothing, but no monitors. So this will show you how good of a band they were too, because they did play some of their older songs. I mean, they opened with Twist and Shout.
And
They
shout.
they
Yeah.
play.
Sure.
They knew these songs by heart because they didn't have to hear each other.
Oh yeah, yeah. Can't
It
buy
was
me love is
instinct.
another. Can't buy me love is another
Yeah.
one.
I mean,
Yeah.
they've done it, thousands of times. So it's so
Right.
amazing just how good they were.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Hmm.
Hey Tom, what's up?
Well, Ed Sullivan wanted to commission this like recording, correct? And
Yes.
did he get a percentage out of this? I mean, was it ended up being a Ed Sullivan production?
Yes.
So he made
And
out.
and what happened was, when Sid got the deal with Brian and he was putting this together, he was really involved. I mean, of course, he had to rent Shea Stadium. Then they got to figure out how this is going to sound, the lights, the stage, all this kind of stuff. Matter of fact, his biggest concern was how to get the Beatles out of there alive. They were not worried that much about the sound. They weren't worried about that kind of stuff. Just how are they going to get them out of there alive? And while all this planning was going on, he got a call from Ed Sullivan and his son-in-law, Bob Precht. And he said, "Do you mind if we film this for a television special?" And it was going to be shown on CBS, the Christmas season of 1965. And Sid said, "Yeah, he didn't mind at all. He was too busy with this stuff. Go ahead and film it." So Ed Sullivan, Bob Precht, again, they contacted Clayco Films, who did a lot of the outside New York street kind of filming stuff for like the Honeymooners and the Ed Sullivan Show and everything. So they set that all up. There was no contract. It was just like, okay, go ahead and do it. So now, all those years later, there's like, well, who owns this film? Do the Beatles own it? Brian Epstein's company, did they own it? Did Ed Sullivan own it? And who the bit? So I know there was some, when they showed the film during that Ron Howard movie in the theaters, there was still some kind of conflict going on. Who actually owns this?
Hmm.
I don't know if that's ever been settled or how they did that. But yeah, there was Sid didn't make any money off it. Ed Sullivan meant to make money off of it, but they couldn't they couldn't sell it. That's the other unbelievable part about this. It was going to be Christmas special on CBS, the Beatles at Shea Stadium. And of course, the Beatles, when they heard, the TV special was already edited and finished by end of August, 1965. And they sent it over to London for the Beatles and Brian Epstein and George Martin to hear. Brian Epstein heard it and he gave it the okay. I have the telegram. It's in my book. Brian Epstein sent a telegram. This is it. Let's go. This is great. Everything on and on. Then he played it for the Beatles and George Martin, and they were like, whoa, no, because again, the sound that they had there, the technology, they couldn't really hear the bass and the drums. And the Beatles were a beat group, B-E-A-T. So if you listen to the original ones, you can hear the bass come in and out. You can hardly hear the drums. It wasn't really representative of what they considered their music. So they pulled the plug on it. So no, you're not going to do this. And they're going to overdub. And Bob Precht wrote back. He says, that's false advertising. We're billing it as it happened. You can't do this. And they said, tough, this is what we're doing. You're not going to put it out. So they didn't overdub until after New Year's Eve. It was January something, 1966. And then by that time, CBS wasn't interested. By that time, I think it was NBC had done a Murray the K special with some like bands at that time. And it was a ratings bomb. Nobody watched it. And so they backed out. They didn't want it. And ABC finally picked it up for a discount price. And it wasn't shown in this country until January 1967. And by that time, it was a historical film because the Beatles all had mustaches and psychedelic clothes. Penny Lane, Strawberry Fields was out, but here they're singing "Twist and Shout" in their Shea jackets. You know, so that's the story behind it. But there were a lot of editing things done, and again, the overdubs were real interesting to follow that.
We are at the 3-minute mark left for this.
Wow, already. Wow.
It kind of flew. Are we interested in going to our next one?
If you guys want to talk, I'm here.
Yeah, I'd love to continue. One thing about what they were wearing on the 65 tour.
Yes.
And you know about what they had on their jackets, of course, David.
Of course. I have a replica here.
Let's save it for the next one.
I got a story behind that. We can save that. All right, what do I do?
All right.
What do I do here? Sign off of this and get into the next one?
Exactly. The next one.
Okay, very good.
Okay, we'll do that.